Hi, I'm Beth Brayland. I am in my 21st year of teaching English at Farmington High School, and we've been using Infinite Campus for I don't know how long, but we really enjoy it and it's worked really well for us.
Hi, I'm Kate Farmer. I've been teaching English courses at Farmington High School for the past 6 years. Throughout that time, we've been using Infinite Campus to report grades. However, I'm really excited recently that we've been able to incorporate reporting through Rubrics using Infinite Campus as a way to communicate with parents and students.
Hi, I'm Elena Godfrey. I teach English at Farmington High School, mostly 10th grade. This is my second year of teaching. When I started at Farmington High School, we were already using Infinite Campus, and I'm just really excited to kind of continue learning and growing with this tool. I found it's really, really helpful for helping students and parents kind of track the students' progress. So I've been working really a lot with it. It's been great.
Hi, this is Kate. Today we are going to be talking about improving student achievement using digital, competency-based scoring rubrics to communicate with students and parents, and how working with Infinite Campus has allowed us to make that improvement. What we're hoping to share is our background and experiences with grading, the challenges we've encountered with reporting grades, why we've been using competency-based grading, and the benefits of using rubrics on Infinite Campus. I first realized I needed to change some grading practices after communicating over a student with my colleague Beth. She called to check on a student when she noticed that the student was struggling in her class, and after looking at Infinite Campus transcripts, she saw that the student seemed successful in English 10A with me when finishing with a B in the class. That should indicate a level of mastery in certain skills. However, we started talking and looking at the grade book, which currently had a weighted system of a certain percentage for classwork, a certain percentage for summative work, a certain percentage for the final exam. What we were able to analyze together was that the student worked very hard, turned things in on time, and was successful in formative assessment that was graded. However, when we looked at the summative section of it, we realized that the student was lacking skills. We were able to analyze this data and work with the student and ultimately have the student be successful. However, it took that communication between Beth and I about 20 minutes on the phone looking at Infinite Campus, and that is a lot of time spent analyzing data for one student when we probably have 4 classes of 30 to 35 students. That's when I realized the data we were collecting wasn't necessarily accurate, and we started doing some research as a PLC about how to report grades more accurately. This led us to begin researching standards-based grading. And one of the first things we started implementing came from Ken O'Connor's repair kit for fixing broken grades. This is when we began not including things like student behavior, effort, participation, adherence to class rules, only achievement and skills. We stopped reducing marks on work submitted late. Rather, we just provided support for that learner. We did not give points for extra credit, bonus points. We're strictly looking to see evidence of higher level achievement. We were no longer punishing academic dishonesty with reduced grades or we used other consequences instead. We were not considering absences. That's always reported separately. And we are no longer including group scores in grades, only individual achievement. We continued researching the 15 fixes by O'Connor while always considering how to organize information and grading records by assessment methods, not assigning grades using inappropriate or unclear performance standards. We're seeking to provide clear descriptions of achievement and expectations. We're not assigning grades based on student achievement compared to other students, strictly comparing each student's performance to preset standards. And we are not relying on evidence gathered using assessments that fail to meet the standards of quality. We want to rely on only quality assessments. We're also not trying to rely on the mean. We're considering other measures of central tendency using professional judgment. And we are not including zeros in grade determination when evidence is missing or as punishment. We're using alternatives such as reassessing to determine real achievement or using incomplete or for insufficient evidence. We are working to make sure that there is value in every assignment, the students are seeing this, and that they need to complete these assessments in order to be successful in the course. Again, all of this from Ken O'Connor's Repair Kit for Grading. One of the most significant steps we've taken from O'Connor's advice was to use only summative evidence to determine grades. Formative assessments are used and reported, however, it is only the summative grade that is reflected in the student's final grade. We are not summarizing evidence accumulated over time when learning, and we're not leaving students out of the grading process. We try to involve the students. They can and should play key roles in the assessment, and we've been able to work that into our curriculum in various ways.
Hi, this is Beth. As Kate was saying, this started for us as a journey to search for an authentic assessment system for students that allowed students to see what skills they were accomplishing and what skills they still needed to work on, as well as a way to communicate with parents about what those skills look like and exactly what we were looking for. So that journey started with a focus on knowledge. What did we want kids to learn? What did that look like then when they showed us their learning? Competency-based grading requires work to be done at a higher depth of knowledge. Okay? It allows students to apply skills and knowledge that they've learned in the classroom and apply it in whatever way we choose to assess them, whether that's in an essay or a test of some sort or a project. It didn't matter how we tested them, as long as they could apply the skills and show us what they could do. That was what was really exciting about competency-based grading for us. It removes the focus from isolated tasks and individual assignments that students could prepare for on a daily basis, or maybe even minutes before they did that, and then the knowledge would leave their brains. And we wanted to avoid that. We wanted them to authentically learn these skills that were so important to us. It also emphasizes connections between learning so that they could synthesize that information from our classrooms into other classrooms and into their lives if it was appropriate. So we started with standards-based grading. That's what we looked at because that's what we were using in our classrooms to design our coursework anyway, so it logically made sense to us to look at standards. It defined the content and the skills of a discipline, and it allowed us a hub for the instructional delivery of content that students then could apply to problem solving and real-world issues. But it didn't focus on what the kids could do or what they knew. It really was a focus more on what we were teaching. And so that led us to our next step towards competency-based grading, which focus more on the ability of a student to apply or transfer content and skills across content areas and even from unit to unit within a content area. It also created a higher order thinking demand on the students. They had to process information through multiple levels of thinking, which we thought was really good when it came to problem solving. And it allowed us to still align the standards. We still used our standards to create our competencies. So everything within the course became succinct and precise and aligned. And it really made what we were teaching in the classroom logical to us and incredibly transparent to students, which the students seemed to really appreciate. To build academic competency statements, we had to start with an old favorite, learners will understand, or learners demonstrate the ability to, depending on what the assessment was going to be. This is more than just standard skills. This is something that they have to do on a cognitively higher level. It can't just be recall. It can't just be something that they cram for, which was really aesthetically pleasing to us because we thought that created a much more real-world experience for students. It forces us and them to answer the question, why are you asking me to learn this? It gave us the answer to it. It gave them a logical place to understand where this learning fit into their world. And it encouraged them then to attempt whatever we were asking them to do, whether they had been successful in this in the past or not. They saw that there was clearly a connection between what we were asking them to do in the classroom and what they were going to apply in their real lives. And that made our cooperative learning within the classroom so much easier and more conducive and more natural. And that was really something we enjoy about making this move. It was one of the things that made this so much more organic than some of our standing in front of the classroom and giving lectures and assigning worksheets. This became, using competency-based assessment, a much more cooperative experience in the classroom. And that, I would say, is the most amazing part of switching to this type of grading. So, I can statements. Okay, in the past we have always, I shouldn't say always, because there are always exceptions, and I said always again, but we have asked students pretty regularly to define words, to understand sentences using figurative language. This is how the standards are created, and it makes it difficult to assess what they actually know on a higher cognitive level if you simply break these down into individual statements and individual tasks. It becomes much more interesting both to the students and the teachers, and it becomes something that they can take into their real lives. When you start to look at it as learners will demonstrate the ability to determine the meaning of unknown words, then the learners can look at any of these things, and whatever their strengths are, whatever their toolkit has in it, they can pull that, they can demonstrate the ability to determine the meaning of unknown words from any of those statements on the left side of the screen. And it appeals to a whole variety of types of learners. It helps create more equity in your classroom. It has been eye-opening for us to get more engagement from our learners in our classroom by creating a competency that says, this is what you have to do, instead of saying, this is how you're going to do it. It has given us that flexibility, and we've really appreciated that, and our students have struggled with it on occasion, but really flourished and improved overall. Our competencies for English 10, because that's what we teach, we started with students will be able to orally present a topic to an audience. That's the standard. It is assessed summatively through an informative speech. We also look at credible research within writing, and we assess that through an informative research essay. We also have learners will be able to closely analyze the written word and respond using critical thinking and appropriate textual support, written or verbal. The nice thing about that one is it can be written or verbal. Now we have more choices, right? So we can assess that through analytical paragraphs, we can assess it through discussion, we can assess it through a one-on-one conversation. You can assess that in a whole variety of ways, whatever works for the student and the teacher. We can all be flexible in how we assess these things. The final one that we use, because we're on a trimester schedule, so we have 12 weeks, and it's not a long time to assess a lot of skills. Learners will be able to demonstrate an understanding of figurative language, word relationships, and nuances in word meanings. We ask students to write an original poem to show us what they know about figurative language. And the quality of the poetry we get now versus what we got 5 years ago when we were doing a more traditional sort of delivery in the classroom, the quality is much more improved. Students are much more engaged, and they feel more confident in taking on this task on their own than they have in the past. And that's been a really great thing with competency-based grading for us.
Hi, my name is Elena. So we have talked about the Farmington High School school setting as well as the competency-based grading system. Now I'm going to show you what this looks like in terms of the assessment itself. So the rubrics as well as Infinite Campus and how it looks when you're uploading those rubrics to Infinite Campus. All right, so this is what the competency-based learning rubric looks like, just a blank format. So you could use this and then fill it in with whatever your learning criteria is, which is listed off to the left in this column. And then your assessments, the criteria itself over here, from beginning to approaching to competent to extending, and then however many of those you have. So looking at the learning criteria and the descriptions, the learning criteria itself, so this stuff over to the left here, should be able to support descriptions along a continuum of quality. So what that means is in here, instead of just having one indicator that's just either they did it or they didn't do it, like say they forgot to put their name on the sheet itself and you give them points for that or not. Instead, you want it to be a continuum. So something that they start and then maybe the skill is approaching, they're adding more to it until eventually they're competent and they fully have that skill itself. So the idea of a continuum between beginning that task, getting better at it, and then becoming competent at it. The effective rubric should also not list all criteria, just the right ones. So when Beth talked about the difference between standards and competencies, standards have just kind of that big laundry list of all of the tasks that students are performing and checking off, and those are still important. However, for the competency, you're just kind of combining all of those together into some of the key areas that you want to focus on the most. So the rest maybe are more lead up or build into the core kind of power criteria itself that you are assessing. And I'll show you an example of what that could look like. So know that you don't want to have quite as many as all these standards you're covering. Try and group them as much as possible to get them the rubric as short and manageable as possible for both teachers and students. For the descriptions themselves, so they should build off one another and show student learning in multiple paths. You want them to be descriptive, not judgmental, or use vague language. So the big focus is on that bottom 2 points, the keeping the wording positive, as well as using student-friendly language, because these are rubrics that you want the students to be able to use and track their own progress as they progress through it and get better. So you have to make sure it's positive, encourages them to improve, and is easily understood by them. So in here, this would be where all your descriptions are. So here's a good example of what a competency-based learning rubric could look like. As you can see at the top, we have our competency listed. So in this case, students will be able to brew a cup of gourmet coffee. Very important standard, I know. So down over to the side, we have our 3 learning criteria that we decide to focus on for this example. So the grind of the coffee itself, the brew, which includes the temp, time, and approach of brewing, and the bean itself. So just an idea of different key learning criteria. Again, when you're teaching how to make a cup of gourmet coffee, there might be more standards that fit under each of these, but these are the big things that are being assessed when you're finally having them brew that final cup of coffee itself. So looking at our descriptions, we have starting out from beginning over to the side. So if we look at example of that first learning criteria, grind, maybe a beginning step could be picking out a bag of ground beans. So the student, again, it's worded very positively. It's what they can do. They picked out that bag of ground beans. However, they may be missing some pieces to get all the way to the competent end where we'd like them to get. But it still focuses on where they're at, what they can do, and then it shows them where they can go to improve upon what they are doing. So picking out a bag of ground beans is a great place to start, but as we know, there's a lot more that goes into brewing a cup of gourmet coffee. So where do they go from there? Maybe if they're approaching, then they're able to not only pick out a bag of beans, but they can also grind the beans itself. And with maybe the help of other students, they can begin to see the need for the size, the grind, and the bean quality itself. So they're approaching, they're not quite to where we want them to get to, but they're able to do more than that, picking out a bag of ground beans. So the idea of it building off of one skill to the next skill and adding more until we get to competent in this third category. Students are able to choose a quality bean and accurately determine the appropriate grind size to adjust flavors. So there we finally have them where we'd like them for that learning criteria of grind. They're able to choose that quality bean, determine the appropriate grind size to adjust flavors without the necessity of asking their classmates for help. And then what we really like about the competency-based rubrics is they also don't just provide competent as an ending point, because as we know, we want students to be continuous learners. So it also provides a great place for students maybe that need an extra bit of challenge. If you have maybe students that are of above and beyond or could use that extra challenge with the same task, we have this extending category. So in that case, it's usually where the student is performing above and beyond the basic requirement that has them be competent. So in this case, for a grind, students will be able to adjust grind size and bean choice for the desired flavor of coffee. So the idea of them going above and beyond just the basic skill of being able to grind the beans and adjust flavors, but for them knowing kind of intuitively how to adjust that in order to get different flavors and types of coffee. So something that's beyond kind of what's necessary, but it's really good to be able to have as a place for those students that need maybe some extra push if they have some room for things they could do better, and just go above and beyond for your overachievers and excellent students that need a little bit more challenge, but also as well to maybe credit those students for what they are doing really well. So again, not just stopping at the competent, but making sure we have kind of a way to honor all of those skills that they have that are maybe super excellent. What are their strengths? So here's a competency-based learning rubric for English 10. So this is the one that Kate, Beth, and I use for our English 10 class. In this case, our competency is learners will be able to closely analyze the written word and respond using critical thinking and appropriate textual support. So for this unit, we had students read several short stories, and then with them, we had them write an analytical paragraph studying something about whether it would be the character or the plot or the theme of the text itself, and they did that in that paragraph itself. And then we had different criteria listed out for how we would grade that. So we started with introducing an idea, gathering supporting ideas, developing those ideas and supporting them back to that thesis. Oh, and there's 3 more on the other side as well too, things like communication, concluding an idea, and citing sources in MLA. But this gives you an idea of some of those categories. So again, we have the beginning sides. This is what, if we were looking at introducing an idea, a student is able to do if they're just beginning that task, that skill. So with help, they may be able to introduce the topic and organize information to make connections, but they wouldn't necessarily be able to do it on their own without someone helping them through that process itself. They're just beginning. Approaching, we add a little bit more. So they are able to introduce a topic. They can organize information to make connections. And then we highlight in bold kind of the differences between approaching and competent. So in competent, we introduce a topic, organize complex ideas, concepts, and information to make important connections and distinctions. That's where we want them to get to. So maybe in here, they have a topic, it's there, it's organized, but it's maybe not as developed or deep enough of analysis as we would like to see in this competent area. But it still honors what the student is able to do at each of those steps itself. And then again, even to that extending. So the idea of a student going above and beyond, maybe they can provide a unique perspective on that topic itself. So all of them are rather similar in language between all of those 3. So the idea of building on where they begin, how they progress through them, and even possibly where they might extend. But the competent category is the one that we are focused on the most. So that's what it looks like when you are grading these. Now the important part is how these match up with Infinite Campus itself. So what does this look like if you're using this grading system in these rubrics in Infinite Campus? What is that reporting going to look like? All right, so now you are in Infinite Campus itself. So this is what it looks like, of course, from that teacher view. We're going to go over to Gradebook. And then here you have each of your different sections. So here an example of the class itself. If you're not familiar with Infinite Campus, has students' names listed off to the side, the current grade that they have, and then all of their assessments over here. So any assignments that you have that you've graded and entered in there. Right now we have 2. So you can see we have the short story practice summative assessment. So remember, when we have these competency-based rubrics, we're going to practice them, have formative assessments several times before that summative, so that students are used to the rubric itself and practicing that skill, so the 2 of them. So we have an example of this first assignment here is the first practice that they would have had at writing that analytical paragraph. The second one is the summative, so that final one after a month-long study of these short stories and connecting them and practicing those writing skills, what their final looks like. So you can kind of make the comparison between the 2 of them. So if we focus on a few students here, looking at Terry right in the middle here, we can see that on his first practice assessment, that analytical paragraph, he did not do well. So he got a failing grade on that one. If we go into it a little bit more and take a look at kind of behind the scenes, what's nice again about Infinite Campus's rubric system is that instead of just seeing a grade there and he's not quite sure what he got unless he took the initiative to go in and look at his grade itself in class on that paper, which for some students might be rather intimidating, or maybe he got it back from the teacher directly but he doesn't quite understand how his grade was. He knows maybe he messed up in a few places, but what exactly made this 10.01 out of 18? So the rubric function over here is what helps. So you click on Evaluate Rubric. And this is again from the teacher view. So as the teacher, you are able to go through and do this rubric on Infinite Campus. So instead of having a paper copy that you fill out and then attach to their paragraph, and then you just enter the grade itself into Infinite Campus, you're able to go in and just fill in the boxes for your rubric itself, and it will automatically calculate student score at the very bottom. So if we look at Terry, we can see for each of those 6 criteria that we showed, introducing an idea and gathering supporting ideas, he was at approaching. He was at beginning for developing and concluding an idea. Clear communication, he did well on, he was at competent. And then crediting sources, again, back at that beginning. So it really gives a great range, and it adds some specifics for students on where they need to make some more progress and where they are already doing well. So it's a great way to both validate the things that they are doing well, so maybe that doesn't always quite make it onto the assignment itself, it's only the things that they did wrong that get marked up. But in this case, it gives us a time to say, hey, your use of word choice and grammar was excellent. So even though you were missing maybe a few other pieces or they weren't all quite there, this skill in particular is a strength of yours. So well done on that. And then here's a few places in specific of where you could improve things and get better with comments off to the side. What's nice about Infinite Campus, again, in particular, is you can provide both specific feedback per learning criteria as well as kind of an overall summative feedback at the bottom there. So within each of those, on the ones where he maybe didn't do so great, I have suggestions of how to improve to get to that next step of approaching or competent, connecting those quotations back, fully explain each one. For these, I find it helpful to even have like a Word document with common errors that maybe students have. Like maybe it's very, very common that students forget to include the author's name and title of the work in their introduction. So on a separate web page, it's just a helpful hint, nice to have like all those really common comments that you make. And then you can just copy and paste them right into the feedback section of here. Saves you a lot of time, so you don't have to rewrite some of these same errors that a lot of students make again and again on each page specifically. You can just kind of pull them over and then drop them right in there. Just a tip. Otherwise, you could just write out specific stuff if you like to. So for each of those, I have some feedback, and that has the score out of 3, and then his total at the bottom, again, with some general reminders of the next things to work on. So this is how we did with that first one. So then between these two, we would ideally have several more practice paragraphs in between those. So it would have SS1, and then we'd have a couple more there as well, too, to show. For the sake of brevity, we don't have them. And then finally, at the very end of the unit, we would have a final unit summative itself. So we can notice that Terry has made quite a lot of progress between the two of them. So he went from that 10.01 to that full 18 out of 18. So let's kind of see how he did on that second one. So again, open it up, click on the Evaluate Rubric. Now he's finally made it to competent in all of these categories where before he struggled. And we have some comments off to the side. praising the amount of work he's done to kind of improve those skills in each of those criteria. And then if you look at that, he even improved in the clear communication category from the competent, I believe, from the last one, to the extending. So this was a student that maybe at the time was struggling with a few other categories that not only improved on those, but also improved upon the thing that he was already competent at to push him into the extending category, above and beyond. So the idea of working not only on the skills that they need to get to competent, but where's some room where we can have them apply their strengths and improve those even further and really kind of honor them as a learner and what strengths they have. So for that, he got above and beyond in that section. Both are 100%, so it's not like his grade goes up necessarily. It's just, again, that idea of giving them that continuous learning opportunity to even strengthen some of the things that they're already doing well at. And at the bottom, again, you have your general comments crediting Terry for the wonderful progress he made with these. And then again, if there was maybe a section he didn't do quite so well on the approaching, you could still add some more stuff in there. But still honoring the fact that he has made significant progress and we're able to show exactly what categories he's progressed in. And again, just a subnote of what's nice about competency-based grading with this is the fact that all of the weight goes to that summative itself. While it might seem scary for students at first, we do, I think Beth and Kay have mentioned this, we let students retake those summative assessments. So say he didn't do quite as well as he wanted to, he could, of course, retake that summative as many times as he would like to try and get that score back up. At the teacher's discretion, usually we have it be that they have to have all of their practice ones submitted first. So if they haven't done their practice, they have to do that before retaking that summative. But the really nice thing that I like to highlight is the fact that because this formative does not count towards that final grade, it is not going to hold him back. So as you can see, his grade over to the side here is an A, 100%. He has that skill, he got that goal. That earlier draft, those first couple attempts at that skill of analytical paragraph writing is not going to sink his grade down to a B. So what it does is it really puts that focus on where students are at in that moment. Where have they progressed to, and gives them a really nice safe space to progress without worrying about their grade sinking or not rising fast enough. So it takes a lot of pressure off of each of those individual assignments and having to perform well on them, and really puts more focus on the learning process itself of getting better and better and better, and just communicating to students that this is how your grade would be scored if this was your summative. And then with each one, we have that opportunity to get better and better. That way, by the time we get to that summative assessment itself, they're already feeling fairly confident about it because they have all this practice, they've been graded the same way, they know exactly what's going to be asked of them, and they know that that will be the one that counts, the one that they finally feel, hopefully at that time, ready to take, which many students we have found greatly appreciate and then do well with. I very, very rarely have a student that does worse on the summative than they do on any of those formatives, and usually, again, that has to do with any outside extenuating factors outside of the classroom. And the opportunity for retake usually is taken by them and they do well with. So that's what it looks like from the teacher view. You're able to go in, edit those rubrics themselves. The only barrier would be at the very beginning, just uploading them for the first time. So when you first click on rubric, when you're setting this up in Campus itself, I suppose I should show you, if you were to say add an assignment. So say we were creating a new one, we wanted to do like a summative or formative assessment, another practice analytical paragraph. We'd fill in all of that stuff, keep it formative, and then notice at the bottom it has that scoring rubric option. So then you can add it. When it clicks on add, yep, that's fine. Oh, it wants me to do points. If you click on add, then you have to fill in all of these criteria by yourself for the first time. You only have to do that the one time. As soon as you have that done, then you are able to go into your library itself. So it has that note, scoring rubrics can be copied from the library itself, which is on that home page. So going back to there, yep, that's fine. Notice there's that library function. So in here, if I had a rubric I liked from before that I wanted to research for, go to assignment itself, because that's what it's attached to, and then search for your name, and it should pop up, and you're able to copy that over into any of those new ones. This is just a demo, so I don't have any other practice ones to pull up. But basically, you'd be able to pull up that same rubric and then pop it in there and have a new assignment itself. Or you could just copy the assignment over and then edit the dates and things like that. So that's how you can find all those rubrics. You don't have to remake them each time. Just a note for that. If you're worried about the actual making of the rubric on there itself, just do it the one time and then copy it over from that library. Now, what I would also like to show you is how it looks from both students and parents as well, too. So it's great that we have all this feedback in there. What does that look like on the student's end? Are they able to see all of these rubrics? Are they able to see all the comments next to them? The answer is yes. I will show you what this looks like from a student view. So we are now in the student view of Infinite Campus. So we are on Terry, his Infinite Campus profile itself. So you can see listed off to the side, he has all of his classes. And then if he was going to go through and look at any of those assignments themselves, they'd be in his English 9 section. We're going to click on this summative assessment itself because it's right there, easy for us to get on. So normally when we're looking at Infinite Campus from the student view, what they can see is the assignment itself, when they turned it in, and then the total points that they got out of it. They're not able to see any of that specific feedback on there. What's nice then about, again, having the scoring rubrics on Infinite Campus is that they have more information about how they did on there. So instead of just seeing the point total and what they got on it, they can click on this view scoring rubric and get an exact breakdown of what it looks like with each of those criteria. So that way they don't have to go into the classroom, find that paper copy of the rubric or whatever assessment you're using for that assignment, and they can access it anywhere and show it and look at it while they're working on stuff at home. Maybe, again, they need a reminder of where they were needed to work on and progress. They can pull that up and go, oh, yes, that's right. I needed to focus on the developing ideas or concluding an idea or whatever it is. So that way they can tailor their assignment to whatever skills it is that they are working on. So it pulls up on a separate window so you can see the outline itself. You can see highlighted in blue where the teacher, myself, put in their score. You can see all of those comments off to the side explaining how to improve or what they did well. And then you can see that summative kind of score and comments at the very bottom as well, too. Again, what's really nice about this version of Infinite Campus is it has both. I've used other scoring rubrics and computer Infinite Campus type things for entering grades that weren't Infinite Campus. And what's nice about this is it has both. Usually they have just either room for individual comments on things, or most common just like one big general section for comments at the end of an assignment if you're entering grades. Usually it's just like the grade itself and then maybe general comments next to them. So having the actual rubric with all of these criteria in there allows us to give Terry much more specific feedback to what he would do well on and what he needs to improve on within each of those categories that he can now access anywhere. It doesn't have to just be in the classroom itself. So that's what it looks like from the student view. Last but not least, I will show you the parent view as well. So not only is this useful for teachers to assess students and give them that feedback, it's also useful for students so they can see that feedback, as well as parents, because parents maybe often have questions about how did my student get this score on this? I'm confused about perhaps the grading scale around the competency-based grading or whatever grading system you use. Having that rubric attached will give them the opportunity to also see all these comments, and they'll have an idea of where their student is doing well and what they can improve on without having to go into the classroom or contact the teacher directly. So I will show you what this looks like from the parent view. Okay, we are now looking at the student view, or the parent side, we are now looking at the parent view of Infinite Campus, very similar to the student view itself. So they have their student listed off to the side and then all of the classes that they are taking. We are able to just click on that summative assessment itself. It looks pretty much the same as the student one, and then they're able to click on that view scoring rubric. And it should pop up with the exact same PDF. It's a separate one, so it's nice if parents even want to maybe download and save them and reference them later if they would like, or bring them to conferences to ask questions. But it's all of that same information. So they have the learning criteria off to the side, all the descriptions there. They can read through them at their leisure and kind of figure out where the student's at with each of them, as well as see the comments that the teacher made on how to progress and what they're doing well and what they could work on. Again, saving a lot of time between parents asking teachers or students being confused. Maybe the two of them together can figure it out. Generally, for what we found, because students have been working with them several times, they're able to explain to their parents quite easily what it is that they're working on and what the different categories mean. But again, it's just an extra tool for parents to look at and see. We found it's helped tremendously, especially when parents do come in for conferences or over email, because then their questions are a lot more focused and easier to answer, and they have a better understanding of what it is that we're assessing in the classroom and what's going on behind kind of that grade that pops up at the very end. It avoids some of those surprises as well, too. So as soon as the parent is used to the idea of their student having several practice ones, of which there's no penalty, so it's okay if we're starting a new unit, and this is a brand new formative assessment that they're practicing, that it's perfectly fine and acceptable for them to have a lower score, and that they get better each time, and as long as they watch their students' scores come in and see them improving before that summative, that's exactly where we want them to be. And they can even help assist with their student if they want, because now they know what categories are being assessed and maybe have some ideas of how to improve on those specific categories. So it helps students, parents, and teachers just have more specific and collective data on how students are doing, and making it very easy to see across all these different platforms for students to access anywhere they wish, as well as parents, and for teachers to much more quickly and accurately assess student needs. All right, so in conclusion, competency-based grading, again, the why behind it, and then how it's kind of that idea of tracking students as they go through and focusing on those key skills and assessments that we'd like to show the understanding of those skills. The skills are transferable, so that competency-based rubric itself, the paragraph writing one for the analytical paragraph, can be used for any short piece of analytical paragraph writing. So it doesn't just have to correspond to the unit itself, the short story unit. We could at a later date read like a full-length novel and have them write a paragraph about it and use that exact same rubric itself to assess it. So ideally, these rubrics are able to be used across several different content, several different units, even used maybe across several teachers itself. So maybe you have teachers that have the same general goals, the same summative assessments that are being assessed, but not the same way in which they're teaching. So the content might be different. This is a great way. So you can share those tools, those rubrics themselves, while still applying it to what you would like to do in your classroom with your students. They are higher order demands, so against that the idea of just checking off boxes, and once you have it, you're done, but that idea of progressing and focusing on the learner itself. And the learner almost takes on their own role, their own leadership role in their grade itself and improving it. So it gives them a lot more agency over their learning itself. And they also are aligned to those standards themselves. So when we had those example grading rubric itself over to the side where we had that grading criteria, you could even align specific standards underneath those if you would like. So you can make sure that they all point back to the list of standards. But the idea is kind of focusing them all into those core things that you want to focus on. And then being able to put those grading rubrics on Infinite Campus. So that involves students and parents in that learning and assessment process. And it really communicates those expectations super clearly. It provides much less opportunities for things to get lost in translation from teacher to student to parents. So that idea of that chain being a lot easier, a lot more information that both students and parents can see. So that will conclude our presentation on Infinite Campus, as well as that competency-based rubrics and how to kind of carry the two together in terms of providing more clarity for students and expectations of those assessments themselves. Thank you.